Virgo, the transformation that no one can ignore. Everyone is noticing it about you. Someone looked at you differently this week, didn't they? Maybe they said, "Wow, you've changed so much," and you smiled, thanked them and moved on. But a part of you didn't rest after that. A part that kept dwelling on the phrase, almost bothered by the compliment. Because deep down, you know something that nobody else knows. This change that people are noticing now didn't start this week. It comes from much further back, from a place you've never shown anyone. There's something strange about being admired for a result when you're the only person who saw the entire process. It's like standing before a newly restored painting, hanging back on the wall, receiving compliments from passers-by, while only the restorer knows how many layers of dirt had to be removed before the original color reappeared. No one applauds the phase when the canvas looked worse than before it began. They only applaud the final result, illuminated, finished. And that's what you feel now, even without knowing how to name it. The praise comes too late. It comes after the hardest part, when you've already processed everything you needed to process on your own. Nobody was there when you had to silently admit that a part of who you were no longer served you. Because that's how Virgo operates internally. There's an internal mechanism that never completely shuts down. A kind of silent vigilance that reviews, adjusts, corrects, not because there's any real defect, but because there's an ancient fear of presenting anything to the world before it's ready. Think of a thermostat that keeps readjusting the room temperature all the time, even when everyone there is already comfortable. It doesn't know how to stop. It only knows how to keep calibrating, searching for a point of equilibrium that deep down never seems sufficient. This mechanism is the reason why, even when receiving praise now, a part of you is already thinking about the next correction. You already notice what's missing, the detail that no one else noticed, but that screams louder to you than any compliment. And perhaps that's why when someone says how you've changed, a question settles in your mind before you can even control it. Are they really seeing you? Or are they only seeing the part you've allowed to show? Because there's a huge difference between showing the result and showing the process. And there's a whole life hidden behind that difference, a life that nobody talks about, nobody praises, nobody even knew existed. There's something curious about restoring antique works. The more valuable the piece, the more discreet the process tends to be. No one films the restorer sweating over the table at 3 in the morning, testing solvents, making mistakes, starting over. The public only arrives when the curtain has already been raised, when the result can be photographed without embarrassment. And it's curious how this reflects something so intimate in those who carry this Virgo energy within. The feeling that one can only appear when the work is, at least, presentable. But there's a silent cost here. While everyone praises the result, no one asks what was left behind. No one asks how many times you almost gave up in the middle of your own restoration. No one asks if, while scraping away the old layers of yourself, you were afraid of discovering that perhaps there was nothing underneath. And it is precisely this fear, kept so deep that you don't always recognize it yourself, that explains why a simple compliment can hurt almost as much as criticism. Because the compliment closes the subject, applauds the screen, and you hadn't even finished understanding what you were feeling while doing so. While scraping away, layer by layer, everything that had once served as protection, that question lingered in my mind for a long time, unanswered, bothering me in a way I couldn't name. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose didn't come to me as just another generic self-help promise. It arrived as a kind of invitation to stop treating each stage of one's own transformation as a draft to be hidden. It speaks directly to those who, like Virgo, build perfection from within without ever showing the scaffolding that supports this work. It's a mental attitude, not a ready-made formula, allowing the process to appear, allowing the restoration to be seen as it happens, without waiting for the final polish to deserve to be noticed. If you've made it this far, you're probably still processing something this narration touched upon, a discomfort that hasn't gone away, a question that hasn't yet been answered. And it's precisely in this raw, ongoing state that it makes the most sense to act. Before your mind goes back to putting it all away in a neatly organized drawer and files the matter away as if it were already resolved. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And in the meantime, tell me in the comments, when was the last time someone complimented a change in you without considering what that change cost? Returning to that discomfort that still had no name. Perhaps it was never about the praise itself, but about what the praise silently demanded in return. There's something no one told you about praise. Sometimes it comes with a hidden demand inside, so well wrapped that it seems like just affection. How you've changed can also mean, without anyone saying it aloud, keep going like this, don't stop, don't go back. It's as if every gallery that applauds the new painting is already quietly asking, backstage, when the next work is coming. And you, without realizing it, are already thinking about the answer even before you finish feeling the pride of the piece you just completed. This creates a silent and exhausting cycle. Recognition fuels more self-criticism, not rest. You never get to stay still long enough to truly feel that it was enough, because for Virgo, enough is almost a foreign word. There's always a possible next adjustment, an even more refined version waiting to be sculpted from the current one. And the problem isn't seeking to evolve. It's never allowing yourself to celebrate what has already been achieved before running after the next step. But there's something even more hidden behind all this, something that few people with this Virgo energy admit, even to themselves. And perhaps it's time to confront this aspect head-on, even if it bothers you, even if it seems more comfortable to keep pointing the finger at the next detail to correct than at the real origin of this behavior. It's not the imperfection that's frightening. It's being seen in the process. It's letting someone into the room just when the paint is still fresh, when the scaffolding is still standing, when nothing there seems ready to be photographed. There's an almost automatic instinct to pull a cloth over the canvas whenever someone gets too close, even if it's the most important and genuine work you've ever done. The fear isn't of making mistakes. It's of being caught in the middle of the process, without the final varnish, without the organized narrative, without the edited version of yourself. And it's no exaggeration to say that this becomes a lifelong habit. You learn early on to only show drafts when they already look final, to only talk about a difficulty after you've already solved it, never in the middle of it. To only admit a doubt when you've already found a way to overcome it. It's almost an automatic choreography. Feel it, process it alone, organize it internally, and only then allow someone to see the result, already packaged, already with a prepared speech explaining what happened. Nobody is invited to the moment when you still didn't know if it was going to work. There's even a word for it in certain restoration circles, invisible finish. It's the technique of making a repair so well done that no one notices there was a crack there. The goal isn't to hide that the piece was restored, it's to completely conceal the trace of the work, as if the imperfection never existed. And that's how Virgo treats her own history for the most part. An invisible finish so well executed that even those who look closely can't imagine how much had to be rebuilt inside. And the price of this is high, though silent, because whoever hides the process also hides the most human part of themselves, the part that makes mistakes, tries again, cries along the way, almost gives up and continues anyway. Year after year, this part is pushed under the rug, stored in a drawer that no one is allowed to open anymore. And what remains visible to the world is only the final, finished, flawless version, a small, dehydrated fraction of everything that really happened. That part you so carefully hide behind the cloth pulled over the screen, it also deserves space to breathe. That's exactly what the digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, addresses for those who, like you, have learned to protect themselves by hiding the process instead of showing it. It presents a practical path to stop treating each unfinished stage as a source of shame, and to begin to see the true discernment that exists in revealing oneself while still under construction. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is an ancient Japanese tradition called kintsugi, in which broken ceramic pieces are repaired with a varnish mixed with gold powder. The crack is not hidden. It is highlighted, illuminated, transformed into the most valuable detail of the entire piece. No one pretends that the vase never broke. On the contrary, it is precisely the repaired fracture that proves that the object has a history, that it survived something, that it is original and not a mass-produced replica without any mark of time. What if, for a moment, you allowed your own cracks to be seen in this way? Not as flaws to hide behind an edited version, but as concrete proof that the transformation is real. Because perfect replicas don't crack. Only what is genuine, what has truly endured pressure, heat, and falls, bears these marks. And perhaps the part you most insist on hiding, that old insecurity, that moment when you almost crumbled, that detail that seems too ugly to show, is precisely the proof that all of this wasn't staged. It was lived. Think about how many times you've heard or told yourself that you needed to be better before showing yourself. Better resolved, better organized, more emotionally stable, so that you could then deserve to appear. As if there were a hidden starting line somewhere, and before crossing it, nothing you could truly count on. But that line never arrives. There's always another adjustment, another newly discovered crack, another reason to postpone showing yourself a little longer. Kintsugi, it is said, was born from an accident. A Japanese feudal lord broke a beloved bowl and, dissatisfied with the common metal clamps used to repair ceramics at the time, asked artisans to find a more beautiful way to repair it. That's how the idea of mixing gold into the glaze arose, transforming the flaw into a highlight. No one planned that crack, but someone decided, after it happened, not to pretend it never existed. And it is precisely this decision, not the absence of the crack, but the refusal to hide it, that separates a genuinely valuable object from an empty imitation. Today, pieces repaired using this technique are displayed in museums around the world, often valued at far more than they would be worth intact. Collectors compete for cracked and mended vases as if they were absolute rarities, because in a way, that's exactly what they are. There is no second identical bowl with that specific crack, repaired in that specific way. Imperfection has become a signature. And perhaps this is the most silent question that lingers here. What would happen if you stopped trying to erase your own marks and began, even gradually, to recognize them as a signature of everything you have already experienced? If a crack repaired with gold is what gives value to a piece, perhaps its own marks deserve the same attention. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign Towards a Life of Purpose, was written with those who carry this very specific Virgo difficulty in mind, transforming self-criticism into real discernment, without needing to erase fractures to feel worthy of recognition. It helps to see each mark not as a defect to hide, but as part of the very clarity you are building. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There is a specific kind of loneliness in being admired. Thousands of people pass by a famous painting every day, take photos, comment on the beauty of the composition, but almost no one reads the plaque next to it recounting the years of restoration it required, the restorer who lost sleep, the tests that failed before the success. The artwork becomes a public spectacle, but the process remains forever a private story. This is how someone who carries the energy of Virgo feels when praised for a transformation, surrounded by recognition and yet absolutely alone, because no one asks how much it cost. No one asks about the nights when you almost went back to being who you were before. No one asks about the fear that this new version of you won't be permanent, that with any carelessness, the old cracks will start to take over again. There's even a painful irony in this. The better the restoration, the more invisible it becomes, and the easier it is for others to assume that things were always that way. No one praises the process of someone they never saw happen. They praise the result, and that's all. And it's easy, in that silence, to start believing that the whole effort had no witnesses, that it simply didn't happen legitimately because no one but you knows the true extent of what was faced. But existing without witnesses doesn't make the experience any less real. The most important restoration of a life rarely happens in public. It happens in the early hours of the morning, in silent decisions, in moments that never saw the light of a camera or social media comments. And perhaps it's time to stop measuring the value of what you've lived by the number of people who witnessed it. Think about how many anonymous restorers are behind the world's most admired works of art. Their names rarely appear in museum captions. Credit almost always goes to the original artist, never to those who brought the piece back to life centuries later. And yet, without this invisible work, the artwork simply wouldn't exist anymore to be admired. There is enormous dignity in this kind of silent contribution, and perhaps it's time to recognize that you are at the same time the original artist and the anonymous restorer of your own history. But there is a possible turning point here. You can stop waiting to be asked. You can, for the first time, tell your own story before anyone asks. Not as a confession of weakness, but as a record that it was indeed work. Perhaps the most important work you have ever done. No one asks the price of a transformation admired from afar, but you no longer need to wait for that question to recognize your own worth. That is precisely the invitation of the digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. To help those who, like you, tend to minimize their own story in the name of silent perfection, to clearly see everything that has already been overcome, without depending on the recognition of others to validate what they know, deep down, is true. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. Perhaps the beauty of it all lies precisely here. The work never needed to be finished, to be worth seeing. There are museums that exhibit restorations still in progress behind glass, so that the public can follow the process live, because they understood something that Virgo is slow to accept about herself. The value is not only in the final result, polished and framed. The value is also in the gesture of continuing to restore, of continuing to carefully revise, of never giving up on something just because it is not yet perfect. There is something profoundly dignified about this type of exhibition. The public who stand before the glass do not see a work pretending to be finished. They see hands at work, brushes resting on a table, tools scattered about, and yet they feel respect, curiosity, genuine admiration. No one leaves thinking that it is less valuable because it is incomplete. They leave understanding that they witnessed something rare, the exact moment when something real was being made. You don't need to hide the scaffolding to be worthy of admiration. You don't need to put the cloth over the screen every time someone approaches. The transformation people are noticing in you now isn't the end of anything. It's visible proof that something genuine continues to live, continues to move, continues, with all the delicacy and strength that this requires to become more real with each layer removed. And perhaps this is the quietest and most beautiful message that Virgo carries to the world, that restoration is not a sign that something was too broken to be loved. It is a sign that something mattered enough to deserve care, time, attention, a fresh start. No one restores what they don't consider valuable, and if you've made it this far, still a work in progress, still revising, still allowing yourself to change, it's because deep down, you always knew it was worth continuing. And that, in itself, deserves to be seen exactly as it is, a work in progress, a process, and absolutely real.